At my sister's funeral that day, the rain poured relentlessly. Black umbrellas crowded under a gray, overcast sky, the sound of earth clattering onto the coffin mixing with the choked sobs of a few relatives. I stood there, my heart heavy, wondering how I could possibly go on living when Chelsea, my only twin sister, the one who had been by my side since the moment we were born, was gone forever. The pain tore through my chest, leaving me almost numb. But then, suddenly my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. On the rain-blurred screen there were just a few words. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." My entire body froze, my hands trembling so violently I nearly dropped the phone. My heart seemed to stop beating. Who sent this message? Could it really be my sister Chelsea? If she was truly alive, then who was lying in that coffin? And more importantly, who had orchestrated this whole thing? My name is Scott Newman, 33 years old, an ordinary worker in Flint, Michigan. I never imagined my life would plunge into a nightmare as horrifying as this. To understand why everything led to that moment, the moment I stood by my sister's grave receiving a message that turned my world upside down, I have to start from the beginning. From our childhood, when Chelsea and I were just two kids clinging to each other in the midst of a broken family. This is the story of our origins, of a tear-filled childhood and secrets only the two of us shared. Chelsea and I were born on a freezing November morning in 1992, in a small hospital in Flint, Michigan. We were twins, with me coming out a few minutes earlier, enough to be called the older brother. Our family was lower middle class, poor really. Dad was a plumber and Mom worked as a cashier at a local supermarket. They married young, full of hopes, but life quickly turned those dreams into burdens. Flint was in decline at the time, with General Motors cutting jobs, and our parents struggled with mounting bills. We lived in a small 2-story house with peeling walls and a leaky roof whenever it rained. It wasn't a cozy home. It felt more like a battlefield. From a young age, I realized our parents didn't really want us. They argued constantly, their shouts echoing through the thin walls. Why did we even have them? They just make everything worse. I once heard Mom scream late at night as Chelsea and I hid under the blankets, holding each other tightly. Financial pressures made them see their children as burdens, extra mouths they couldn't afford to feed. Dad often came home drunk after work, reeking of alcohol, while Mom cried and blamed him for not earning more. They were selfish, focused only on themselves, and we, two kids, became invisible victims. Chelsea and I only had each other. We were each other's shield, protecting one another from that coldness. As twins, we were strikingly similar, both with dark brown hair, blue eyes, and crooked smiles when we tried to hide our sadness. But our personalities differed. I was stronger, always protecting her, while Chelsea was smart, dreamy, always finding ways to make things better. From the age of 6, we learned to take care of ourselves. Breakfast was often peanut butter sandwiches we made ourselves because Mom slept late after night shifts. We walked to school hand in hand, avoiding the dark streets of Flint where older kids would bully us. One memory I'll never forget is the Christmas Eve when we were 8. Our parents had a huge fight, as usual, about money. Dad smashed a glass and Mom cried and went to bed. We sat under a cheap fake Christmas tree with no gifts except a few stale candies. Chelsea looked at me, her eyes glistening with tears. "Scott, did Santa forget us this year?" I swallowed my own tears and hugged her tightly. "No way. He's just busy, but I'll be your Santa. Tomorrow I'll find something to give you." And I did. I snuck out, picked up some pretty stones by the river, and drew clumsy pictures on them with colored pencils. Chelsea beamed, hugging me. "You're the best brother in the world." In that moment, amidst the coldness of our family, we found warmth in each other. As we got older, around 12, we started working odd jobs to support ourselves. Flint wasn't an easy place for kids, but we were resilient. I delivered newspapers in the early mornings, running through snow-covered streets, the cold wind biting my skin. Chelsea babysat for a neighbor, earning a few dollars an hour. We shared every penny, half for school supplies, the other half for ice cream on sweltering summer days. "I'm saving for books. You can buy whatever you want," Chelsea would say. But I always spent most of it on her. We hid our money under the bed in an old tin box, afraid our parents would find it and take it. The evenings when our parents fought were the worst. Their shouts rose from the living room, objects shattering. We hid in our shared bedroom, the door locked tight. Chelsea would cry, burying her face in her pillow while I held her and told stories to distract her. "Imagine, Chelsea, we'll grow up, leave this place and live somewhere beautiful. I'll work hard, you'll study well, and we'll have our own house." She'd nod, wiping her tears. "And we'll never fight like Mom and Dad, right?" I promised her that though deep down I knew life wasn't that simple. Our childhood was filled with tense moments, not the thrilling kind of adventure, but a constant undercurrent of stress. In school, Chelsea was far better than me. She loved books, devouring ones she borrowed from the library. I preferred hands-on work, fixing bikes for neighbors to earn extra cash. But we always shared. She taught me math, and I taught her to swim in the Flint River, even though the water was dirty and dangerous. One summer afternoon, we nearly drowned when a strong current pulled her under. I dove in, dragged her to shore, both of us coughing and gasping. "You saved me," she whispered, clinging to me. In that moment, I realized she was everything to me. Not just my sister, but a part of my soul. The childhood years in Flint, Michigan, though harsh, forged us into resilient people. But as we turned 18, our paths began to diverge. Chelsea, with her sharp mind and big dreams, was destined to soar far. I, on the other hand, chose to stay in Flint, tied to its dusty streets and simple life. That was the beginning of a journey neither of us could have anticipated. A journey leading to dark secrets, that rain-soaked funeral, and the message that made me question everything. I still remember the day Chelsea received her scholarship acceptance letter from a university in Boston. It was a fall afternoon with golden leaves scattered across the yard. We sat on the front steps, our breaths mingling in the cold air. Chelsea opened the envelope, her hands trembling, then screamed with joy. "Scott, I got in!" Her eyes sparkled as if the whole world was opening up before her. I smiled, hugging her tightly, but a pang stirred in my chest. I was proud, but also afraid that the distance between Boston and Flint would pull us apart, not just physically, but emotionally. Chelsea was always the smarter one. At school, she was praised by teachers and loved by friends. She had a way of making everything feel lighter, even on the darkest days. I was the opposite, struggling with school, not suited for books. I liked the smell of motor oil, the sound of car engines, and the satisfaction of fixing something broken. While Chelsea pored over her homework, I was out in the yard repairing bikes for neighborhood kids to earn a few bucks. But despite our differences, we always complimented each other. She patiently explained math problems to me, and I taught her how to swim, how to stay calm when the Flint River's current pulled hard. Those small moments bound us closer than anything else. When Chelsea was preparing to leave for Boston, I decided not to pursue further studies. "I'll work as a laborer, stay here, and look out for you from afar," I told her one night as we sat under a starry sky. Chelsea grabbed my hand. "You don't have to take care of me forever, Scott. I'll study hard, make lots of money, and we'll live together somewhere better." I nodded, but deep down I knew her dreams were bigger than anything Flint could hold. The day she boarded the bus to Boston, I stood at the station watching her wave through the window. "Promise you'll visit, Scott," she shouted. I grinned. "Promise, but don't you forget me either." Tears streamed down her face, and I turned away so she wouldn't see me crying too. I stayed in Flint, working at a factory making auto parts. The job was grueling with long night shifts, but steady. I rented a small apartment, lived frugally, and occasionally sent money to Chelsea for books. My life was simple. Work in the morning, watching football in the evening, fixing cars for neighbors on weekends. I didn't dream as big as Chelsea, but I was content. As long as she was okay, that was enough for me. In Boston, Chelsea thrived like a fish in water. She wrote letters often, describing her classes, new friends, and the vibrant city. "Scott, Boston is so beautiful. I walked along the Charles River once and wished you were here." She called every week, her voice brimming with excitement. Hearing her warmed my heart, though sometimes I felt left behind. She was living in a different world, one of tall buildings and big opportunities, while I remained in Flint, surrounded by dust and the hum of machinery. Then one day, Chelsea told me about a guy she met at school, James, a medical student from a wealthy family in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. "He's really nice, Scott. Not arrogant like other rich people." I laughed over the phone. "Watch out, don't let him distract you from your studies." But deep down, I was worried. Chelsea was young, and I didn't want her to get hurt. But James turned out to be exactly as she described: kind, thoughtful, and genuinely in love with her. When she brought him to Flint for the first time, I saw the difference immediately. James wore an expensive dress shirt and spoke politely, but he didn't look down on me, a grease-covered worker. "Chelsea talks about you a lot," he said, shaking my hand firmly. I nodded, sizing him up carefully, but I couldn't help liking him. Chelsea and James quickly became a couple. After a few years of dating, they got married. I flew to Boston for the wedding, my first time leaving Flint. The ceremony was held at a seaside mansion in Cape Cod owned by James's family. I stood there in a borrowed suit, feeling out of place among the elegant guests. But when Chelsea walked out in her pristine white wedding dress, I forgot everything else. She looked like an angel, her smile radiant. "Scott, I'm so happy," she whispered, hugging me before the ceremony. I squeezed her hand. "As long as you're happy, I'm happy." But deep down, I worried she was stepping into a world too different, one where I could no longer protect her. Chelsea's married life seemed like a dream. James became a doctor, and they lived in a stunning Cape Cod mansion with a garden overlooking the sea. Chelsea sent photos, her standing on a yacht, beaming beside James. "You have to come visit. The ocean here is gorgeous." I'd laugh and promise to come, but work at the factory kept me tied down. I was proud of her, but the gap between us grew wider. She was now part of high society, while I remained a worker in Flint. Then tragedy struck. 3 years after their wedding, James was diagnosed with a rare genetic disease. Chelsea called me, her voice trembling. "Scott, James is really sick. The doctors say he won't make it." I immediately took time off work and flew to Cape Cod. At the hospital, I found Chelsea sitting by James's bedside, holding his hand, her eyes red from crying. James was frail but smiled when he saw me. "Thanks for coming, Scott. Take care of Chelsea for me." I nodded, my throat tight. A month later, James passed away. Chelsea was devastated. I stayed in Cape Cod for a few weeks, trying to comfort her. "Scott, I don't know how to go on," she sobbed, her head on my shoulder. I held her. "You're stronger than you think, Chelsea. I'll always be here." But I knew she was grappling with a pain I couldn't fully understand. James wasn't just her husband. He had opened up a new world for her, a world of safety and love we never had in Flint. After James's funeral, his lawyer called Chelsea in. I went with her, still in my old suit. At the lawyer's office, we learned that James had left his entire estate to Chelsea, nearly $30 million, including bank accounts, the Cape Cod mansion, a luxury yacht, and shares in his family's company. Chelsea was stunned, gripping my hand under the table. "Scott, I don't want this fortune without James," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "I know, but this is what James left so you could live well. You have to be strong." We left the lawyer's office in silence, stepping out onto the sunlit streets of Cape Cod. The ocean sparkled in the distance, but Chelsea didn't look at it. Her eyes were red, her shoulders trembling slightly. I knew she was thinking of James, the husband who had given her a life we never dared dream of in Flint. But I also saw the burden weighing on her. That immense fortune wasn't just wealth, it was a curse in disguise. It turned Chelsea into a financial time bomb. not only in the eyes of strangers but also within our own family. Back in Flint, I returned to my factory job, but my mind was always with Chelsea. She stayed in Cape Cod, living alone in the sprawling mansion once filled with her and James's laughter. I called her every day, trying to pull her out of her grief. "You okay, Chelsea? Need me to come over?" She'd manage a weak smile over the phone. "I'm fine. It's just, I feel empty." I wanted to fly to her immediately, but night shifts and piling bills kept me tethered. All I could do was warn her, "Be careful with that money. Don't let anyone take advantage of you." Chelsea nodded, but I sensed the naivety in her voice, the loyalty she still felt toward our parents despite their unworthiness. News of Chelsea's wealth quickly reached Flint. I wasn't surprised when our parents, who once saw us as burdens, suddenly changed their tune. One evening, Mom called, her voice unnervingly sweet. "Scott, how's Chelsea doing? We're so worried about her." I gripped the phone, struggling to stay calm. "Chelsea's fine, Mom. She needs time." But Mom didn't stop. "She's so rich now, she must want to help the family, right? You know we're struggling." I clenched my jaw, wanting to scream that they'd never cared about us, but I only said, "Chelsea will decide for herself." A few days later, Dad called Chelsea. She told me about it, her voice full of confusion. "Dad said he wants to fix up the house and asked if I could help with money." "Scott, what should I do?" I sighed. "Help them a little if you want, but don't let them push you too far. That's your money." But Chelsea, with her soft heart, sent them a large sum, more than enough to renovate the house and pay off their debts. I was proud of her kindness, but worried. Our parents weren't the type to stop. Their greed, I knew, was a bottomless pit. They started calling more often. Mom would complain about medical bills. Dad would hint at buying a new car. "Chelsea, you have a yacht, a mansion, why not share with your parents?" Mom said in a call Chelsea recounted to me. I was furious. "They think you're a bank or something? Chelsea, you need to be firm." She nodded over the phone, but I heard the exhaustion in her voice. "I just want them to be happy. They're our parents, after all." I wanted to yell that they didn't deserve it, but I knew Chelsea needed time to see the truth. I started noticing a change in how our parents treated me too. They invited me to dinner, a rarity over the years. The dinner took place in the old Flint house where we grew up. Dad opened a bottle of wine. Mom smiled brightly, but I saw their eyes, not familial warmth, but calculation. "Scott, talk to Chelsea for us," Dad said, his tone syrupy. "She's so rich she wouldn't let her parents suffer, right?" I gripped my fork, forcing myself to stay calm. "Chelsea's helped enough. Don't ask for more." Mom looked at me, a flash of irritation in her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean? Family helps each other." I stood up and left without another word. Deep down, I knew they wouldn't stop. Chelsea began to feel the pressure. One night, she called me, her voice trembling. "Scott, Mom and Dad want me to transfer part of the property to them. They say it's how to show filial piety." I nearly shouted into the phone. "Filial piety? What have they ever done for us besides fight and neglect us?" "Chelsea, don't agree to it," she cried. "I know, but I don't want them to hate me." I sighed, softening my tone. "They don't hate you, they just want your money. You have to protect yourself." I tried to convince her, my heart burning with frustration. The pressure from our parents grew heavier. One morning, Chelsea called me in a panic. "Scott, Mom and Dad are pressuring me to give them $1 million. They say if I don't, I'm an ungrateful daughter." I was livid just hearing it. I couldn't take it anymore. I took off work early and drove straight to our parents' house. Inside, Dad was lounging on the couch watching TV while Mom was cleaning the kitchen. I didn't mince words. "Stop it. Stop pressuring Chelsea. She's done enough." Dad looked at me, smirking. "What are you talking about, Scott? Chelsea's so rich, what's wrong with helping us out? It's what kids do." Mom chimed in, her voice icy. "She's got tens of millions. Sharing a few million with us is perfectly reasonable, isn't it?" I was stunned by their shamelessness. "You never cared about us," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Don't pretend to be good parents now." Dad stood up, pointing at me. "How dare you talk like that? If it weren't for me and your mom, you wouldn't even exist." I turned and walked out, my heart heavy. They felt no shame, no guilt for exploiting their own children. The invisible pressure Chelsea faced didn't just come from our parents. Word of her wealth had spread and strangers started approaching her. Someone claiming to be an old friend of James called, suggesting she invest in real estate. Another sent a letter asking for charity donations. Chelsea was exhausted from saying no, but she didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. "Scott, it feels like the whole world is staring at my bank account," she said once, her voice bitter. All I could do was comfort her. "You're not alone. I'll always be here, standing by your side." In those months, I could sense Chelsea's unease in every phone call. Each time I heard her voice, I detected a creeping fear. Not of losing her money, but of losing herself in the whirlwind of greed from those around her. And most terrifyingly, our parents, who should have been her rock, were the source of the greatest pressure. One evening, as I was eating instant noodles in my small apartment, Mom called. Her voice was so sweet it sent chills down my spine. "Scott, I was thinking we should organize a family trip. Chelsea has that yacht James left her, right? We could all go on a vacation, help her relax, and mend family bonds." I went silent. The idea sounded reasonable, but something felt off. Our parents had never cared about mending family ties. They only showed up when Chelsea was sitting on a mountain of money. I immediately called Chelsea and told her about the conversation. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Scott, I was thinking a trip might help me unwind. These past few months have been exhausting." I hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I don't trust Mom and Dad." Chelsea gave a weak laugh. "They're our parents after all. Maybe they want to make up for things." I wanted to argue, but her voice was full of hope. I couldn't bear to snuff out that flicker of light in her, so I nodded. "All right, I'll go with you. But if anything feels wrong, you listen to me." The trip was planned quickly. Our parents suggested a few days sailing on James's luxurious yacht, setting out from Cape Cod along the Massachusetts coast. Chelsea was excited and started preparing. She sent me pictures of the yacht, a stunning masterpiece with polished wooden decks, lavish bedrooms, and a state-of-the-art control room. "Scott, you're gonna love it," she texted with a smiley face emoji. I smiled, but my unease lingered. Our parents were too enthusiastic, too eager. They called constantly, asking for details, even suggesting hiring a small crew to ensure safety. "We'll handle everything," Dad said, his voice brimming with confidence. I agreed, but my bad feeling grew stronger. Then, the night before the trip, Mom called me, her voice frantic. "Scott, your dad's really sick. We probably can't go." I was stunned. Sick with what so suddenly? Does Chelsea know? Mom sighed. "We've told her. But we insisted she go ahead with the trip. Don't cancel. She needs to rest after everything. We put so much effort into planning this. Don't let it go to waste." I bit my lip, feeling an invisible cord tightening around my chest. "Are you sure? It'd be more fun with the whole family." But Mom brushed it off. "It's fine, Scott. You go with Chelsea, take care of her. Your dad's sick, so we'll join next time." I hung up, my heart pounding. Something was wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. I called Chelsea right away. She confirmed that our parents had called, her voice tinged with sadness. Mom said Dad has pneumonia and can't go. But she insisted I should still do the trip, said I need to clear my mind after James's death. I frowned. This feels strange. Why would Dad get sick right now? Chelsea paused, then said, "Maybe you're worrying too much. It'll be fine. The crew's already been hired by Mom and Dad. You'll come with me, right?" I sighed, not wanting to disappoint her. "All right, I'll go with you." On the day of the trip, I drove to Cape Cod. Chelsea met me at the marina, her smile as bright as it used to be, though her eyes still carried a trace of sadness. The yacht was even more magnificent than I'd imagined. a floating palace on the water. The crew consisted of 3 people, a seasoned captain, a technician, and a young assistant. They were polite and seemed professional. "Everything's ready, sir," the captain said, his voice steady. Chelsea grabbed my hand, pulling me onto the deck. "Scott, it's gonna be fun. Just you and me like when we were kids." We set sail on a clear morning, the sea shimmering under the sun. Chelsea stood dissenting at the bow, her hair blowing in the wind, smiling at me. "Remember when we swam in the Flint River?" "This is a bit fancier," I laughed, but my heart wasn't at ease. I checked the communication systems and asked the captain about the weather forecast. "Everything's fine, Scott," he said. "It's just a short trip, nothing to worry about." But I couldn't shake the feeling that behind this calm a storm was brewing, not just from the sea, but from our own family. The first day on the yacht passed peacefully. Chelsea and I sat on the deck, sipping fruit juice, reminiscing about old stories. She laughed more, as if the weight on her shoulders had lightened. But by the second day, the sky began to darken. Gray clouds rolled in, and the wind picked up. The captain reassured us. "It's just a small storm, we'll steer around it." I nodded, but told Chelsea to stay in the main cabin where it was safer. That night I couldn't sleep, pacing the deck, checking everything. The communication system started acting up. Radio signals were weak and the satellite phone wouldn't connect. "Probably the weather," the technician said, but his anxious look unsettled me. At dawn on the third day, the storm hit like a monster. Waves several meters high crashed against the yacht, flooding the deck. Chelsea clung to my hand, her face pale. "Scott, I'm scared." I pulled her into the cabin, shouting at the captain, "Turn back! This storm's not normal." But he shook his head. "We're too far out. Turning back would be more dangerous." The wind howled and the waves roared, drowning out our voices. Everything descended into chaos. Then, like a nightmare, the yacht shuddered violently. A loud explosion came from the engine room. "The engine's gone!" the technician yelled. Waves pounded the boat, making it lurch. I dragged Chelsea to the lifeboat, securing a life jacket on her. "Listen to me. If the boat capsizes, hold on to me, okay?" She nodded, her eyes full of tears. The captain and crew scrambled, searching for life preservers. But before I could do anything else, a massive wave hit. The yacht flipped like a leaf in the vast ocean. Icy water engulfed me. I surfaced, shouting Chelsea's name over the roaring waves. "Chelsea! Chelsea!" I swam, searching in the darkness, but saw only debris from the yacht floating around. My strength and swimming skills from our days in the Flint River kept me afloat, but I couldn't find Chelsea or anyone else. The waves kept coming and I clung to a piece of wood, calling her name until my voice gave out. There was no response, just the sound of wind and sea. I don't know how long I drifted, maybe hours, maybe a day. The storm calmed, but I was exhausted, frozen to the bone. Finally, a distant light flickered. The Coast Guard arrived, pulling me onto their rescue boat. "Where are the others?" I shouted, my voice hoarse. They shook their heads. "We're still searching, but we haven't found anyone." I collapsed, tears mixing with the seawater on my face. "Chelsea, where are you?" The Coast Guard launched a widespread search but found no trace of Chelsea, the captain, or any of the crew. They brought me to shore where I lay in a hospital, my body drained and mind in turmoil. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Chelsea being swept away by the waves, heard her calling my name. I blamed myself. Why didn't I stop this trip? Why didn't I suspect something sooner? I lay in the hospital bed, my body aching, my mind clouded as if still submerged in that stormy night. The hospital room was cold, filled only with the steady beeping of the heart monitor and the pale light from the window. I gripped the thin blanket, trying to block out the image of Chelsea being swept away. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice calling Scott, amid the howling wind and crashing waves. Blaming myself, I muttered, "Why didn't I stop her? Why didn't I see it coming?" But there were no answers, only heart-wrenching pain. After 2 days in the hospital, my emotions in tatters and my heart broken, our parents came to visit. Dad wore his old worn jacket and Mom had a gray scarf. They looked like they'd rushed over. But something in their eyes sent a chill down my spine. Not parental concern, but a strange tension, as if they were acting in a play. Mom approached, placing a hand on my shoulder, her voice trembling but insincere. "Scott, are you okay?" We were devastated when we heard. Dad stood behind her, nodding, but his gaze avoided mine as if searching for something. "Thanks for coming," I said, my voice raspy, trying to stay polite despite the turmoil inside. Mom sat by the bed, taking my hand. "Tell us what happened on the yacht," she said, her tone overly eager. I frowned, recounting briefly the storm, the yacht capsizing, my search for Chelsea with no success. Mom nodded, but her eyes lit up strangely when I mentioned Chelsea. "So, you're sure you didn't see her?" she asked, her voice low as if probing. I froze, feeling like someone had poured ice water over me. "I'm sure," I replied, looking straight into her eyes. "I looked everywhere, but the waves were too strong." Dad cut in, his voice low but loaded with implication. "The Coast Guard said they didn't find anyone else." "Maybe. Chelsea's—" He trailed off, but his tone made me shudder. They weren't grieving, weren't crying. They were confirming something, as if needing me to verify Chelsea was gone. Mom squeezed my hand tighter. "Poor girl," she said, her eyes welling up, but I knew her too well. Those tears weren't real, just like the time she cried during fights with Dad only for attention. "We just wanted her to rest, so we suggested the trip." She continued, her voice full of justification. "Who could have known this would happen?" I looked at her, then at Dad, searching for a shred of sincerity, but found only calculation. Why were they so insistent on Chelsea going only to back out at the last minute? My bad feeling surged, but I stayed silent, pretending to be exhausted so they wouldn't press further. Dad stepped forward, patting my shoulder. "Rest up, Scott. This isn't your fault." They stayed a few more minutes, asking more questions about the yacht, who was there, how the communication systems worked, what the Coast Guard said. Each question felt like a drill boring into my pain, as if they wanted to ensure no trace of Chelsea remained. When they left, Mom turned back, giving me an inscrutable look. "If you hear anything about Chelsea, let us know right away, okay?" I nodded, but in my heart I knew I wouldn't tell them anything, not until I understood what was really going on. The days that followed were like living as a shadow. The hospital released me back to Flint, but I couldn't return to the factory. Every morning I woke up staring at the void where Chelsea's smile used to be, hearing her call Scott in my broken dreams. I blamed myself endlessly. Why didn't I stop that trip? Why didn't I suspect our parents sooner? The bad feeling from their visit clung to me like a monster lurking in the dark, but I had no proof, only pain and helplessness. 3 weeks after the accident, my phone buzzed. A Coast Guard officer called, his voice heavy with sorrow. "Mr. Newman, we found a body on the shore near where the yacht capsized. It's badly decomposed, not immediately identifiable. But we suspect it's Chelsea, as the time of death matches the accident." My heart seemed to stop. I wanted to scream that it couldn't be Chelsea, that she was alive somewhere, but the words caught in my throat. "Thank you," I whispered, then hung up. I sank to the floor, hands clutching my head, tears streaming down. Chelsea, my sister, the only one who truly understood me, might be gone forever. I called our parents, my voice breaking. "The Coast Guard found a body. They think it's Chelsea." Mom cried over the phone, but her sobs sounded hollow, like a poorly acted play. "Oh, poor girl," she said, but I felt no trace of genuine grief. Dad cut in. "You okay, Scott? Did the Coast Guard say anything else?" I clenched my jaw. "Not yet. They're still verifying." But Dad's cold, probing tone made me shudder. Days passed, and the autopsy couldn't definitively confirm if the body was Chelsea's due to severe decomposition. All they could conclude was that it was a woman, and the time of death aligned with the yacht accident. The body was sent to a morgue in Cape Cod for family identification. The day I walked into that cold room, my heart pounded, my hands slick with sweat. When the white sheet was pulled back, a chill ran down my spine. The face was distorted, barely recognizable. I stared, but a nagging doubt gnawed at me. Something wasn't right. It didn't feel like my sister. Yet I couldn't be sure. I requested a DNA test to confirm it was Chelsea, but they said it could take 1 to 2 months. Meanwhile, our parents were eager to rush the funeral arrangements. Everything was quickly set in motion. I chose a white coffin for Chelsea, like the color of the wedding dress she once wore. At the funeral home, I stood looking at photos of her on the altar. Chelsea beaming beside James, Chelsea hugging me by the Flint River with hopeful, sparkling eyes. Each photo was like a knife, reminding me I'd failed to protect her. I wanted to scream, to smash everything, but I just stood there, numb, letting the pain consume me. The funeral took place on a day of torrential rain. The sky was gray, black umbrellas crowding around the cemetery. The sound of dirt hitting the coffin mixed with the choked sobs of a few relatives. I stood near the coffin, hands clenched, my eyes blurred with rain and tears. A few of Chelsea's friends from Boston came, hugging me and offering condolences I barely heard. "Chelsea was wonderful," a girl said, her eyes red. I nodded, but my mind was stuck on the moment she was swept away by the waves. I'd searched for her, called her name until my voice gave out, but the ocean didn't answer. Our parents arrived late, dressed in black, their demeanor formal but cold. Mom approached, giving me a brief hug, then whispered, "She's at peace now, Scott." I looked at her, searching for genuine grief, but saw only dry eyes and an evasive glance. Dad stood beside her, patting my shoulder, but the gesture lacked warmth. They lingered near the coffin for a moment, then started talking to a stranger. I guessed a lawyer or banker. I caught snippets of words like estate, inheritance, procedures. My heart twisted. Chelsea had just been laid to rest, and they were already discussing money as if she were just a number in a bank account. I stepped forward, my voice trembling with anger. "What are you doing? This is Chelsea's funeral." Mom turned, her eyes flashing with irritation. "Scott, don't make a scene. We're just planning for the future." Dad chimed in, his tone calm. "She left behind a lot, Scott. It needs to be handled." I clenched my fists, wanting to scream that they were heartless, that Chelsea deserved more respect. But I held back, not wanting to turn her funeral into a fight. I turned away, standing in the rain, letting the cold water mask my tears. I couldn't stand their hypocrisy, the parents who never loved us now exploiting my sister's death. As the ceremony neared its end, people began to leave. I stood alone by the grave, staring at the headstone engraved with Chelsea's name. The rain soaked my coat, but I didn't care. I whispered, "Chelsea, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you." At that moment, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, the rain-blurred screen displaying a message from an unknown number. "I'm alive. That's not me in the casket." My body froze, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. My heart seemed to stop. Who sent this message? Was it Chelsea? If she was alive, who was in the coffin? What was this damn message about? I looked around. The rain kept falling, the cemetery empty. Our parents had left at some point, leaving only a few relatives standing far off under umbrellas. I shoved the phone back in my pocket, my heart pounding. I couldn't let anyone see me panicking. I quietly left the cemetery, rain streaming down my face, but in my mind 1,000 questions swirled. If Chelsea was alive, why hadn't she contacted me sooner? Where was she hiding? And most importantly, who was behind all this? The unease about the yacht trip, our parents' sudden withdrawal, now felt like a terrifying truth. I knew I had to act, but first I needed to find Chelsea, if that message was real. I drove away from Cape Cod, not back to Flint, but to a small roadside diner. I needed a quiet place to think. Sitting in a corner booth, I stared at the message, analyzing every word. "I'm alive." Chelsea's voice echoed in my head like when she called me as a child, I wanted to believe she was alive, but the fear that this was a cruel hoax held me back. I texted back, "Chelsea, is it really you? Where can I find you?" But there was no reply. The phone stayed silent as if the message were just a ghost. That night, I lay in a cheap motel staring at the ceiling, trying to piece it together. The yacht trip, the storm, our parents' absence. It was all too coincidental. Was it orchestrated? And if so, what role did our parents play? I gripped the phone, hoping for another message from the unknown number, but it remained silent. I whispered into the darkness, "Chelsea, if you're alive, I'll find you. I promise." I fell asleep in exhaustion, but my sleep was restless, filled with images of Chelsea being swept away by waves and the calculating looks of our parents at the funeral. When I woke, the rain was still falling, the gloom matching my mood. My phone buzzed, a new message from the unknown number. "Meet me at Truro Beach, the small wooden cabin by the lighthouse, 9 p.m. Don't tell anyone." My heart pounded. Was it Chelsea or a trap? I didn't know, but I couldn't ignore it. I grabbed my coat, took my car keys, and drove to Truro Beach, not far from Cape Cod. The rain kept falling, the roads slick, but I didn't care. If there was even the slightest chance Chelsea was alive, I had to take it. Truro Beach was deserted when I arrived, with only the sound of waves crashing and the faint glow of the lighthouse. I found the small wooden cabin tucked behind the dunes, its windows dimly lit. I knocked, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my chest. The door creaked open, and there stood Chelsea, alive in the flesh but thinner, her eyes full of worry. "Scott," she whispered, throwing herself into my arms. I held her tightly, tears streaming down my face. "Chelsea, is it really you?" I thought. I couldn't finish before she pulled me inside, quickly shutting the door and glancing outside as if afraid someone was watching. The cabin was sparse, just a table, a few chairs, and an old mattress. Chelsea sat down, trembling, and began to tell me everything. "A fisherman saved me. He found me drifting at sea, clinging to a piece of the yacht's wreckage. He brought me here, but I asked him to keep it a secret. I'm scared, Scott. I think someone wanted to kill me." I froze, sitting across from her, holding her hands tightly. "Chelsea, tell me everything." She took a deep breath, her voice shaking. "The body the Coast Guard found. I think it's the assistant from the crew or someone else, I don't know. But Scott, I suspect Mom and Dad. They suggested the trip, they hired the crew, but then backed out at the last minute. Mom said Dad was sick, but did you see him sick? They knew about my fortune and they wanted it." I nodded, my heart heavy. I told her about the funeral, how our parents discussed the estate right by the coffin, their cold, calculating looks. "I thought the same, Chelsea." "They weren't grieving. They were satisfied, like they knew you wouldn't come back." Chelsea bowed her head, tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't want to believe it, but it's too clear. They pushed me to go on the trip even when I hesitated. They said it was to help me cope, but I felt like they wanted me gone. I squeezed her hand. "Chelsea, I'm sorry. I should have stopped that trip." She shook her head. "It's not your fault. You've always tried to protect me." Then Chelsea revealed a secret that stunned me. "Scott, I was worried something like this might happen, so before the trip I made a secret will. If anything happened to me, all my assets would go to you. And if anything happened to you, everything would go to a charity. I didn't tell anyone, not even Mom and Dad." I stared at her, incredulous. "Chelsea, why didn't you tell me sooner?" She gave a sad smile. "I didn't want you to worry. I just wanted to make sure if anything happened, the money wouldn't end up with people who don't deserve it." I hugged her, feeling both proud and heartbroken. Chelsea, no matter the circumstances, always thought of me first. But that also meant if our parents knew about the will, they'd come after me too. "Chelsea, you have to stay safe. We need evidence to expose them." She nodded, her eyes flashing with determination. "I know, but I can't show myself now. If they know I'm alive, they'll try again." We sat in the dimly lit cabin, planning under the faint glow of the lamp. First, we had to secure the will. Chelsea said it was held by her private lawyer, Harold Grayson, a trustworthy man. "I'll contact him, ask him to keep everything confidential," she said. I nodded. "I'll meet Grayson, make sure the will is safe. But more importantly, we need proof that Mom and Dad were behind the accident." I suggested returning to the marina where the yacht had departed to investigate anything suspicious before the trip. Chelsea gripped my hand, her voice firm. "Scott, I trust you. But you have to be careful. If they were willing to hurt me, they won't hesitate with you." I nodded, anger and determination rising within me. Our parents, who had neglected us since childhood, were now willing to kill their own child for money. I wouldn't let them win. Before leaving the cabin, I hugged Chelsea tightly. "Are you safe here?" I asked. She nodded. "The fisherman is kind. I'll be okay until we have enough evidence." I looked at her, my heart aching at how thin she was, her eyes tired but still shining with resilience. "I'll be back soon. No one's touching you again." She smiled, the same smile from when we were kids. "You're my hero, Scott." I left the wooden cabin late at night. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy, as if the storm from the yacht was still lurking somewhere nearby. Driving back to Cape Cod, I felt a fire blazing in my chest, not just hope because Chelsea was alive, but anger. Our parents, who had neglected us since childhood, were now willing to kill their own child for money. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, telling myself, they won't get away with it. Not this time. The next morning, I drove to the office of Harold Grayson, Chelsea's lawyer in downtown Cape Cod. He was an older man with silver hair, a deep voice, and sharp eyes. I introduced myself, explaining that Chelsea had entrusted me to check on her will. Grayson studied me, his gaze probing. "Miss Newman mentioned you. I thought she was..." He paused as if realizing something. I lowered my voice. "Chelsea's alive, Mr. Grayson. She's in hiding for her safety. I need to ensure the will is secure." He nodded, asking no further questions, and led me to a safe. The will was there, clearly stating that if Chelsea died, all her assets would go to me. "I'll keep it confidential," Grayson said. "But be careful. Money makes people do terrible things." I thanked him and left the office, feeling a slight relief, but the weight still pressed on my shoulders. The will was safe. Now it was time to find evidence. I drove to the marina where the yacht had set sail. The Cape Cod marina was quiet in the early morning, with only a few fishermen and workers cleaning up. I walked into the manager's office. The manager, a gruff old man named Joe, eyed me suspiciously. "You're asking about the yacht that capsized, right? Sad story." I nodded, explaining I was the brother of the victim. Joe sighed, pointing to a dock worker mopping the floor. "Talk to Eddie. He notices weird stuff." Eddie was a young guy with messy hair and sunburned skin. I bought him a coffee and led him to a secluded corner of the marina. "Eddie, did you see anything strange before my sister's yacht left?" He shrugged, but his eyes flickered. "Not sure, but yeah, there was something." He lowered his voice, glancing around as if afraid of being overheard. "The night before the yacht sailed, I saw a strange guy sneak on board. Tall, black coat, baseball cap covering his face. He was in the engine room for a while, then slipped away." My heart raced. "Did you see his face?" Eddie shook his head. "Too dark, couldn't tell. But I swear he wasn't part of the crew. I told the captain, but he said it was nothing to worry about." I gripped my coffee cup, trying to stay calm. A stranger on the yacht right before it capsized. This wasn't a coincidence. I thanked Eddie, slipped him a few bucks, and left the marina. I had my first lead, but it wasn't enough. I needed to know who that man was and who was behind him. My gut told me our parents were involved, but I needed solid proof. I decided to return to Flint and keep an eye on them. If they had orchestrated the yacht's capsizing, they'd surely leave a trail. Back in Flint, I rented an old car to avoid being recognized and began tailing our parents from a distance. They still lived in the old house, but now they had a new car and fancier furniture, clearly bought with Chelsea's money. I parked at the end of the street watching through the windshield. The first day, nothing unusual. Dad went to work, Mom to the grocery store, but on the second day I saw them leave the house at night driving to a seedy bar on the outskirts of Flint. I followed, keeping my distance. Inside the bar, smoke hung thick and loud music blared. Our parents sat in a dimly lit corner facing a man in a black coat with a baseball cap pulled low. Just like Eddie's description. My heart pounded. I sat a few tables away, pretending to sip a beer, straining to listen. They spoke softly, but I caught fragments. It's done. No one suspects. Insurance money. My blood surged. They were talking about the yacht, about Chelsea, like it was a business deal. When the man left, I followed him. He drove an old pickup truck toward an abandoned industrial area. I kept my distance, my heart racing. When he stopped near a warehouse, I parked behind, stepped out, and called, "Hey!" He spun around, his eyes panicked. "Who are you?" He growled. I stepped closer, my voice cold. "I'm Chelsea Newman's brother. I know what you did on the yacht." He backed away, but I was faster, grabbing his collar and pinning him against the wall. "Talk. Who hired you to sabotage the yacht?" He trembled, trying to break free, but I held firm. All right, he shouted. "Your parents. They paid me 50 grand to mess with the communication system and the engine. They said it just needed to look like an accident. No one would suspect." It felt like a punch to the chest. "They wanted to kill Chelsea?" He nodded, eyes wide with fear. "I didn't know they wanted to kill anyone. I just followed orders." I clenched my fist, wanting to hit him, but held back. I needed him alive, needed his confession. I forced him to write down his confession and recorded it on my phone. "If you run, I'll find you," I threatened. He nodded frantically and fled. I stood in the dark, replaying the recording, my heart pounding. Our parents, the people who gave us life, were willing to kill Chelsea for money. But I needed more evidence to ensure they wouldn't escape justice. The next day, I dug deeper. I contacted an old friend who worked at an insurance company, asking him to check some records. He called back, his voice shocked. "Scott, your parents took out a huge insurance policy on Chelsea's yacht right before the trip. If it sank and she was gone, they'd get millions." I gritted my teeth as the pieces fell into place. They didn't just want Chelsea's fortune. They'd planned to ensure she never came back. I called Chelsea from a payphone to avoid being traced. "Chelsea, I have proof." The guy confessed Mom and Dad hired him to sabotage the yacht, and they took out insurance before the trip. She was silent for a moment, then said, her voice trembling, "Scott, I didn't want to believe it, but we have to stop them." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. We met and devised a meticulous plan. Chelsea would stay in hiding, safe until the last moment. We planned to reveal the truth at the estate settlement our parents had been eagerly awaiting, presenting the man's confession and the insurance policy. I also contacted Grayson again, asking him to prepare the paperwork to reveal Chelsea's will at the right moment. "We'll let them think they've won, then turn the tables," I said. Chelsea agreed to the plan. I returned to Flint, preparing for the final battle. Each night I reviewed the recording, read the insurance policy, and thought of Chelsea, my sister who survived the storm and our parents' plot. I gripped my phone, whispering, "Chelsea, I'll bring justice. I promise." The estate settlement hearing was held at a courthouse in Cape Cod, where Mr. Grayson had arranged everything. I had contacted him beforehand, sending copies of the recording and the yacht's insurance policy. "These are strong pieces of evidence, Scott," he said over the phone, his voice low but confident. On the day of the hearing, I drove to Cape Cod, my heart pounding. I wore my old suit, the one I'd worn to Chelsea's wedding, now worn at the shoulders, but still the most formal thing I owned. In my pocket, I carried a USB with the confession of the man from the marina and a copy of the yacht's insurance policy. Most importantly, I had arranged for Chelsea to appear at the perfect moment, the final move to flip our parents' game. The courtroom was small but packed. A few distant relatives, some bank employees, and curious onlookers drawn by news of Chelsea's vast fortune filled the seats. Our parents sat in the front row, dressed impeccably, their confidence chilling. Mom wore a black dress, her hair neatly pinned, surveying the room like a queen about to claim her throne. Dad sat beside her, his eyes cold and calculating, whispering something to her, likely about the money they expected to seize. They didn't know I'd seen everything. Their scheming looks at the funeral, the saboteur's confession, the insurance policy signed right before the trip. They thought they'd won, but today I would make them fall. The judge, a middle-aged man with a stern voice, opened the session. Mr. Grayson stood, briefly outlining the estate distribution process. Our parents sat upright, Mom even flashing a slight smile as if everything was already in their grasp. I stood in the corner of the room, hands clenched, waiting for the moment. The judge asked, "Is there anyone who objects or has additional information regarding Chelsea Newman's will?" Our parents glanced around, their smug expressions certain no one would dare speak. That's when I stepped forward. "Your Honor," I said, my voice ringing through the room, drawing every eye to me. "I have critical information." Dad spun around, his eyes flashing with anger. Mom gripped his hand, her face paling but still trying to maintain composure. I continued. "Chelsea Newman, my sister, is not dead. She's alive. And there are people in this room who plan to kill her for her fortune." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The judge frowned. "Mr. Newman, do you have evidence? This is a serious accusation." I took a deep breath and stepped to the center of the room. "I have proof, Your Honor. And more than that, I have Chelsea herself." I turned toward the door. It swung open and Chelsea walked in, thin but resolute, her eyes blazing with determination. The room fell silent, as if time had stopped. Our parents leapt to their feet, faces ashen, mouths agape. "Chelsea!" Mom screamed, but her voice wasn't joyful, it was panicked. Dad clutched her hand, his eyes wild as if seeing a ghost. Chelsea stepped to my side, her demeanor confident. "Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "I am Chelsea Newman. I didn't die in the yacht accident. I was rescued, but I had to hide because I believe someone tried to kill me for my inheritance." The courtroom buzzed again, whispers spreading through the crowd. The judge raised a hand for silence. "Miss Newman, please explain further." I stepped forward, pulling the USB from my pocket. "Your Honor, I have evidence that the yacht's capsizing was no accident. A man hired by our parents confessed to sabotaging the yacht's communication system and engine." I handed the USB to a court officer, requesting the recording be played. The man's trembling voice filled the room, clear and damning. "Her parents paid me 50 grand to mess with the yacht. I didn't know they wanted to kill anyone. I just followed orders." Mom screamed, "Lies. We didn't do anything." But her voice faltered, her panicked eyes betraying her. I continued. "They also took out an insurance policy on the yacht right before the trip with a payout of millions if it sank and Chelsea disappeared. Here's a copy of the policy." I handed the document to the judge, my eyes never leaving our parents. Dad stood, pointing at me. "You dare accuse your own parents? You ungrateful brat!" But the judge banged his gavel, ordering him to sit. "Mr. Newman, you'll have a chance to explain later." Chelsea stepped forward, her voice steady. "I made a will, leaving all my assets to my brother, Scott Newman, if anything happened to me. Our parents didn't know this, and they tried to kill me to take my late husband's fortune." Mom burst into tears, but I knew it was an act. "Chelsea, how could you say that? We only wanted the best for you," she cried. But no one in the room believed her. Her crocodile tears were painfully obvious. The judge reviewed the documents and listened to the recording again. He looked at our parents, his voice stern. "These are extremely serious allegations. I will request a police investigation. Furthermore, since Miss Newman is alive, the estate remains in her possession." I grasped Chelsea's hand, feeling the weight on my shoulders lift. We had exposed our toxic parents in front of everyone, relatives, lawyers, and those who once thought our parents were grieving victims. Chelsea looked at me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Scott. I knew you'd do it." I squeezed her hand. "We did it, Chelsea, together." The weeks that followed unfolded quickly but were filled with pain. The police launched an official investigation into our parents. The recording of the saboteur's confession, the insurance policy, and Chelsea's testimony were undeniable evidence. They were charged with fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted theft of assets. During the preliminary hearing, I sat in the back row watching our parents stand before the judge. Dad kept his head down, silent, while Mom still tried to scream, blaming Chelsea and me. "They're framing us. They're ungrateful children." But no one believed them. The judge declared they had forfeited all rights to Chelsea's estate, and the case would proceed to a criminal trial. I didn't feel victorious, only a deep sadness. They were our parents, but they had severed the last thread connecting us. Chelsea decided to cut ties with them completely. One evening, as we sat in her Cape Cod mansion, she gazed out at the sea, her voice low. "Scott, I never want to see them again. They were never our real family." I nodded, understanding her feelings. "You don't need them, Chelsea. You have me." She turned to me, her eyes glistening with tears. "You're my only family ever since we were kids." I hugged her, feeling like we were back in those nights in Flint, hiding in our room, sharing an apple in our dreams. Chelsea chose not to keep the mansion. She sold it, using the proceeds to establish a charitable foundation in James's name to support poor children in Flint, where we grew up. "I want to do something good," she said, "like what James did for me." I was proud of her, but also heartbroken. Chelsea, despite enduring so much loss, still held onto her compassionate heart. We also reached out to the families of the captain and crew members who were presumed to have perished in the yacht accident. Chelsea met with them, expressing her condolences and providing substantial financial support to help them through their hardships. They were victims, just like me. "On behalf of our parents, I'm sorry," she said, her eyes red. I held her hand, feeling the strength in her vulnerability. Chelsea wasn't just my sister. She was the strongest woman I knew. Our story didn't end with a triumphant victory, but with a fragile peace. Our parents, driven by greed and selfishness, lost everything, not just the fortune, but the children they never cherished. Chelsea and I, though scarred forever, found each other again, as we always had since childhood. I looked out at the sea, thinking of James, the people we'd lost, and Chelsea, my soul, the one I'd protect until my last breath. "We'll live well, Chelsea," I whispered, "together."